Okay. Welcome, Gabriella, to the podcast. Thank you so much for coming on to chat with me.
Thank you
Um,
so much for having me. It's a delight to see you again.
so I will start by asking you, are you well, actually?
Mm. So I'm just going to take a moment to just really feel into that question. And yeah, as I just sort of tune in and notice, I feel my shoulders softening. I feel this seeing you, being with you, although it's virtually, I just feel this really lovely kind of heart expansion, love connecting with you. And I am in my new home where I've actually come back home to my birth city of Houston, Texas. So I'm looking out my window into this beautiful park that I grew up in. So many beautiful memories. And it is really that feeling. I have that feeling right now of just coming home, being at home in myself, being at home in my body. So yeah, I feel well.
Great. That's so good. So I guess you would describe the feeling of wellness as being at home in your body, in your
Yeah,
skin.
just feeling, that experience of being comfortable in your own skin. And I think when we feel this, we're able to engage with life more fully. And unfortunately, stress, anxiety, overwhelm, we face daily in a culture that prioritizes productivity, doing versus being, right, leads to a disconnecting from our bodies. It leads to discomfort, to numbing. So I think it's so important to be in that day-to-day engagement with our internal states, really, and acknowledge compassionately where we are in the moment instead of rushing to try to fix it, to bypass it. And so sitting in that discomfort, if it's discomfort, because it's in that discomfort, I always say that our greatest learning lies. And then finding practices, and this is what I share with people. I know it's what you do in your practice of yoga. There's so many modalities out there. Finding a modality that works for you, that allows you to soothe and tend to your feeling state. And that opens this doorway to a greater sense of what I call embodiment, which is that compassionate dialogue with your inner world of sensations, emotions, and feelings, bringing your whole body online and present. I mean, your body is talking to you all the time, right? It's
Right.
talking all the time, but as I mentioned, we live in a culture where we bypass those languages, and we hear that phrase in the wellness world: "Listen to your body." What does that really mean, right?
Yeah.
And it is that it is taking time to notice what is your body asking of you in the way of nourishment, in the way of connection, in the way of rest, movement, pleasure, and how can you tend to those messages that your body's sending you.
Amazing. And this is the work you share. You're an embodiment coach. And
Yes,
so
yes.
could you tell us a little bit about your journey to embodiment? I'm sure it's an
Oh,
ongoing journey, but could you tell us? I mean, I'm sure it'll take a time, but if you can, give us.
yeah, no, it's an ongoing journey. Let's see. Well, having been back home, being back home now in the US, I lived in the UK for so
Yeah.
long. I've had time to reflect on this question because I feel that coming home to myself. And I do remember, when I was young, having that beautiful sense of wonderment and engagement with the world around me. I remember one of my first sort of somatic experiences, meaning that sense of tuning into my feeling state. My father was always one of my greatest teachers. He used to put on a piece of music that I loved. I remember it clearly, Ravel's Bolero, and he would have me close my
Mm.
eyes, put my hands on my belly, and he's like, what do you feel? What do you sense? What are you envisioning? Right? It's such a clear memory that wonderment with music, that wonderment with my senses, with what
Mm.
I was envisioning, and I see, and we engage with life like that when we're young, right? That
Yeah.
sense of wonderment and awe. I have this beautiful rose garden in the park that I live close to now, and I remember so clearly. I mean, it lives in my cellular memory, going to that park and smelling those roses. It was such a delight. And now I get to go and do that. I literally am, steps away from this park, and I go and do that every day. I go and smell the roses. But it is that sense of wonderment and awe and engagement with life that we experience when we're young, that we disconnect from as we move through life and become adults. So for me, that started happening, that disconnection, actually, when I became a mom.
Really
Oddly
interesting.
enough, when I became a mom, and all of a sudden I was thrusted in. I didn't have a handbook.
Yeah.
But I don't think anyone hands us a handbook of how to be parents, no matter how much you try to read and prepare. But I didn't have a handbook, and I was striving to be the perfect mom, the perfect wife, do all the things to create a safe and nurturing family system, pretty much create a lot of what I didn't have. So I did have that nurturing experience with my father, but then there was a time when there was some rupture in my
Sure.
early childhood. My parents divorced. I was raised by a single mom who was constantly on survival mode, and she imprinted into my nervous system that same sense of survival, right? Of protection and being hyper vigilant. So that was my model. That was my model of parenting. So even though I didn't need to parent in that way, I was in a very stable marriage. I was financially secure, something my mother wasn't. I was educated. I spoke English. My mother was an immigrant to the US, so she wasn't fluent in English. She spoke Spanish. So she was, understandably in this constant survival mode. And that's what I saw. That's what imprinted in my system. And that's what I modeled when I became a parent, even though it was not necessary.
Yeah.
And so that constant hypervigilance, that constant striving, trying to achieve something, sent me into this state of disconnect from myself. And I hit a point where I was burned out. At the same time, I was also trying to establish my my business as a yoga teacher. So I was, teaching back-to-back classes, as we all used to be when we were first getting started. And living in a busy city like London, hitting the tube. So just you get the picture. Trying to parent,
Totally.
trying
Yeah.
to have your own business, trying to do all the things. And I burned out. I totally burned out. I developed a autoimmune condition called Graves' hyperthyroid.
Oh, yeah.
Hyper, not hypo. So that means your thyroid goes into overdrive, producing too much thyroid hormone. And it kind of mimics some of the similar, and this was when I was in my late 30s, early 40s, like just beginning my 40th year. And they mimic the same symptoms. Hyperthyroid mimics the same symptoms of what I now know is peri-menopause. So that late reproductive stage in a woman's life when her hormones start to fluctuate. Your progesterone starts to decline, your estrogen is going up and down. At the time, I didn't know it was perimenopause. So I was living in what I call this liminal state, sort of not knowing where, just not knowing where I was going to,
Yeah.
trying to figure out where I was coming from. And it was a very confusing time in my life. I spent about 8 years in that perimenopause state, very confusing. There wasn't as much awareness of that stage in a woman's life as there is now. And so what I did was I dug deep, found the teachers, found the guides, and it was through embodiment practices, really that
Mm.
connecting with my inner world, seeing what was there to excavate and to witness and to face and know what what lessons those internal my inner body world was trying to tell me. And so it was a real coming into my own. Really, it was a really kind of emerging on the other side. Now I feel like I've accumulated all of this wisdom. I've been able to connect and feel comfortable with my body, and not in a way that I don't want, I'm not longing for the 20, 30-year-old version or even 40-year-old version. I'm now, 50, 55, but I'm really feeling like I'm owning my 55-year-old version, owning my pleasure, my power, my purpose, and can communicate my desires from a place of truth, from a place of love. And this is what I want for everyone.
Yeah. That's so interesting what you say about owning your pleasure, because I think women's pleasure, although things are different now than they were maybe 20, 30 years ago, I still feel that women's pleasure can be shrouded in a bit of shame, and even more so as you become older. This idea that, maybe you're not like, it's just not shown as much being sexual. That's why or sensual even. I love the videos you put where you're doing your somatic movement and you're just moving the hips and like really connecting in, because it's so beautiful. And I think we're lucky because we have, and you said you had to dig deep to find those teachers and those guides, but perhaps working already in the yoga world, we're already a little bit more aware of where these people are, maybe. But for people for people in their perimenopause or in the menopause who don't have any access to that, it must seem like, oh, I guess I'll just go hide in the corner of the room then and get through this. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think understanding, right, that especially if you're entering that phase, that we know now that it happens, as I experience in the later reproductive stage of most women. So that can be in your mid to late 30s when you start experiencing those symptoms. So, really empowering yourself with knowledge, knowing, learning all there is to learn about this phase in a woman's life. So, menopause is just one day, right? So you can think, oh, that day is way, way, way off into the future. I don't even want to think about it. But so it's just one day. The period leading up to menopause can last anywhere from 3 to 10 years, right? And it starts in our mid to late 30s until you reach maybe the average age of menopause, which is 51. And in between, in that liminal phase, right, we do experience those hormonal fluctuations. And it's so important to be prepared, to prime our bodies for that initiation, for that transition. And no, it doesn't have to mean going and sitting in a corner of a room. It means really taking stock of how you're managing your stress. Stress is such a huge driver of our symptoms. It's hugely important. That's why I teach a lot of, I start with embodiment. It is really taking stock of how you experience your inner world so that you're able to shift and tend to your body in the way that your body needs to. So really being able to listen to those messages instead of bypassing. Does your body need rest? Does it need movement? Maybe you need to shift the kinds of movement. So when I was going through that time period, I was, like most of us, really, engaging in some intense forms of yogic practices, practicing, maybe 3 hours a day. I was a big lover of Ashtanga at the beginning. Then I moved to Iyengar, which was really intense and very, I love the structure. It was very precise and and alignment, the precision and alignment really resonated with me, but it meant holding poses for a really long time and meant getting into really difficult poses at a time when I wasn't really resourced for that. So I would arrive home in the evenings feeling exhausted, feeling like ready just to hit my head on my pillow and just call it a night. But I couldn't. I had to keep going. So I would override it because I had 3 kids. I had to put dinner on the table. I had to help with homework. I had to take them to football matches, after school activities, and I had to also go teach, right? So I was constantly overriding that. And so I got to a point where my yoga practice was basically just lying over my bolster for 15 to 20 minutes a day in the morning and then in the evenings. But I didn't know that was what I needed, right? I didn't know that's what, but when I crashed and burned out, that became my yoga practice, just lying over my bolster, hands on body, listening and paying attention to my breath, really tuning into what was it, asking myself, what does my body need right now in this moment? And if it was, having to cancel some of my private one-to-ones or shift them, or saying no, really establishing some firm boundaries, saying no to, certain engagements, especially that had to do with, my kids' schools, or even at home with my partner, really rearranging how we managed our day-to-day family life, and just saying, I am going through this period of my life right now. I am entering this very tender moment where I need rest, where I need help, where I need support, and where I need a bit of holding. And so it's all of those things that we don't ask for as women, especially. We think we can do it all, and we think we can just keep striving and doing, when it really requires time to pause. Totally, and really listen in and tend to what our bodies need. And so much of that period was about suppressing, pushing down my desires, my wants, my needs. And that also happened, for me, sexually, right? Especially during this time when your libido goes down, for me, it kind of switched off and I didn't know what happened. And I realized there was so much about pleasure that I didn't know. Right.
Totally.
There's so much we haven't been taught about pleasure.
This is the thing about it being kind of kept in the idea that women, yes, of course we're sexual beings, but it's that thing of like, let's not talk about it though. Let's not share about it. Let's just keep it in the private. So yeah.
It's been seen as taboo, as something to keep secret, as something to be feared, right? It's as though, we're going to cause some harm if we engage with our sexual energy. And the truth is, in the yogic scriptures teach us this, is that we've all been brought into the world with this energy. It's life force energy, right? And your life force energy, you can call it chi, you can call it your vitality, your spark, whatever you want to call it. It feeds our creativity, it feeds our spontaneity, our passion, our power. It's the current of energy that flows all around us, through the mountains, through the rivers, and we're all part of it. We're all part of it. I remember learning that teaching of this life force energy that we all have, early on in my yoga learning process. And it really stuck with me. And it wasn't until I hit that wall of like that, I had lost that life force. I had lost my connection to that life force, where I thought, I need to do something about it. I want to reclaim it. I want to find it again. And then especially when you're going through this very tender period of perimenopause in your mid to late 30s, you arrive to this point and you're wondering, where has that spark gone, right? And we're wanting to reclaim that connection, our connection to that energy. So that is what I do. I teach practices that allow us to reconnect with that energy, because the whole world benefits when we are connected to that energy. When we're connected to that energy, it ripples out into our communities, into our relationships, into our family life, into our work. So I work within a framework I called embodied female pleasure. And it helps women reconnect with their body, cultivating a deeper awareness of sensations. It addresses the nervous system. The nervous system is essential to allow you to identify and process emotions. It allows you to expand your perception of pleasure so you can experience it in all aspects of your life. So it's not only, the sexual aspects, it is that engagement with life. What is it that lights you up in the morning when you wake up? And it's the practices that allow you to access pleasure that's already deeply within you. And that's something that I realize that goodness, you could call it goodness, you can call it, is innately part of each and every one of us. So it's a process that allows you to deepen your appreciation for your body and enhance your confidence with your body, and helps you really awaken other, bigger, expansive potential for pleasure, both sensually and sexually.
Totally. And was there like a turning point, and was it more over time, like throughout perimenopause for you, or was there like a one moment where you had an experience where it sort of started off the next phase when you were like, right, I'm getting back in touch with my sensuality, that energy, that chi that you speak of?
Well, I mean, it was that feeling of having lost it completely, feeling of not feeling at home in my skin, not feeling at home, that sense of disconnect. And yes, of course, like I said, it ripples out into your family life, into your relationships. So I knew that was something that was missing. I had tasted it, I had felt it, I had experienced it, and so it was missing. And so it was a gradual process. And when I went engaged with a lot of these embodiment practices that I share with women, when I started studying with my teacher Michaela Bohm about 10 years ago, there was a lot of resistance to go there, because it meant uncovering a lot of things that I didn't want to see, a lot of things that I had been pushing down, right? Because that's what we do, right? When we are trying to be everything that we want to be, whether it's, the perfect wife, the perfect mom, or be the perfect yoga teacher, doing all the things that you want to do that society's asking to do, you start, pushing down things that need to be uncovered. And then also the perimenopause phase, because your progesterone levels are declining. Your progesterone is that feel-good hormone, right? Your progesterone is declining, your estrogen levels are going up and down, so you're losing sleep. But what happens when your progesterone levels start to decline is all that stuff that you have been pushing down starts to come up to the surface to be reckoned with. And what happened for me was that I had to deal with a lot of issues that I hadn't dealt with, especially around adverse childhood experiences, is what we call them. They're traumatic events that happen when we're young, that have a lasting impact on your mental, emotional, and overall well-being. So I had to start uncovering and dealing with some of those adverse childhood experiences. And they can be adverse childhood experiences, if for anyone who is not familiar with them, They can be, emotional, physical, or sexual abuse as a young child. It could be the divorce of your parents. It could be living with a parent who has a substance abuse issue. It can be having been abandoned, as a child. It can be having a death, of a loved one. And when we experience them as young people, as young children, they do, and they're not dealt with, they do have a lasting effect. And research has shown that when we're moving through the menopause transition, if you've experienced adverse childhood experiences, which most of us have, right? Most of us have some kind of adverse childhood experience, that if you haven't really dealt with them, you can experience greater and more intense symptoms of menopause. So your symptoms are more intense and can last longer, or they can start earlier, right? So if you haven't dealt, or if you have experienced these adverse childhood experiences. So we all know, especially in this world of COVID, when we were forced to be at home with our bodies, that a lot of that came up, right? The whole collective experience was traumatic. We've experienced collectively so many traumatic experiences, but it also uncovered the fact that our bodies are holding so much for us. So many experiences, so many wounds, so many events that are there to be witnessed, there to be uncovered, and there to be healed. And so what I do with these practices is get women in touch with what their body's holding them. I'm trauma informed. I'm not a trauma therapist, but so if things come up that are that trigger traumatic experiences, and that I feel women need deeper support with, then I'll refer to a trauma therapist or a somatic experiencing practitioner. And I also, go through this onboarding questionnaire when I work with women to make sure that they're aware of trauma in their history and whether or not they've dealt with it. So that is a big component of my personal experience, and something that I continually work with, and I support women in getting the right support with, or helping them move through that. So I work with a variety of somatic modalities to help women deal with
just for any of the listeners that might not know what the word somatic means, could you give a little just brief explanation, just so?
Sure. So somatic comes from the Latin word soma, which means the living body. It was somatics was developed in the 1970s by an educator and movement therapist named Thomas Hanna, and it's a body-based approach of movement, of body work, of talk processes, which emphasizes the internal perception and experiences of the body. And so it works with this idea of interoception, right? Of feeling your inner body. So when we are better able to feel within our bodies, we can access our body's innate intelligence. We can access our body's subtle cues for support, for healing, for well-being. And from this place, we can return to that sense of being at home in our bodies, of welcoming really the full spectrum of our human experience, the comfortable and not so comfortable, and doing so from a place of compassion. And when you connect with your internal body world with somatic practices, they help facilitate self-awareness. You are able to develop clear boundaries. It improves self-esteem. You're able to regulate your emotions. You're able to make better decisions. You feel better about your body and in your body. You have a sense of enhanced intuition. and like a deeper connection with yourself and with others. And so it's such a powerful modality. And yes, some forms of yoga are somatic in origin, but it's not a it's different from yoga or from dance in the sense that it's non-linear, so it's
Yes.
non-directional,
Yeah.
right? So I can't tell you how to feel in your body. Only you have the answer of that. So I guide you to
Mm.
feeling what there is to be felt in your body through the practices, but your body's doing it for you. Your body's intelligence is guiding you. And so I
Amazing.
work with a practice called the non-linear movement method, which is a powerful somatic modality, which allows you to identify, release, and process stress and emotional tension. It smooths out your nervous system. It releases trauma patterns into flow, opens your body to your innate wisdom, and makes space for creative expression and connection to yourself, your heart, and your own personal expression in the world. And so there are a series of very subtle, continual, non-forced movements that are guided by your own bodily intelligence.
Yeah, because I was going to ask you actually, what if you had a sort of a daily somatic movement that you it was sort of
Mm.
like a non-negotiable, but I guess maybe from what you've said, it changes day to day and how you move.
Well, this modality, the nonlinear movement method, has different modalities within that
I see.
modality, within the method. And so there is a modality called moving what you're feeling. So it's very simple. You can do it on your hands and knees, or you can do it, if you're more experienced, do it standing up. And I create a playlist, and I put on a track from the playlist, and I just start exactly doing that, moving with what I'm feeling, like really closing my eyes, tuning in, and moving with what I'm feeling in that moment. So it could be I'm moving with tension, I'm moving with anger, I'm moving with sadness. And then with the movement, I'm able to start shifting and processing and identifying what my body is holding for me. And sometimes it's just the awareness of, wow, that's what my body's holding for me today, sadness. Sometimes it's the shifting of that sadness to another state of being. So I'm not trying to not feel or push away what I'm feeling. I'm trying to acknowledge and process what I'm feeling, and welcome where I am in this moment with compassion. And you can move into another feeling state, which is amazing, but that's not what I'm necessarily trying to do. There's also another modality called release. So I know you spoke to Mia Togo in your first episode, where she spoke of rinse and release. I think that's her modality.
Mm.
So this modality is not the same as her rinsing process, but it has that effect of rinsing and releasing through movement. And so I guide you in simple prompts. So you're guided by my prompts, you're guided by the energy of the music, and you're guided in feeling and releasing what there is to be, feeling what there is to be felt, and releasing what there is to be released. So that's another modality. There's pleasure. So pleasure, moving into pleasure is another modality where we start to tune into that innate pleasure and goodness that we all have within us. And we do that through gentle exploration of breath, movement, sound. And then there's another modality called calling in, which is another form of sort of manifesting, if for lack of a better word, right? Most people understand that word of manifesting, but we call it calling in. So I guide you with prompts, music, movement, to really tune in an embodied way. what you want to bring forth in the world. What is it that you want to call in? What is your purpose? And so we work in a very embodied way with your intentions and what it is that you want to manifest in the world. So those are some of the modalities within this method.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. And with the one where you're, say, where you're rinsing, or when you're, sorry, when you're releasing, do you
Mm-hmm.
often find that does it helpful after you've moved through some stuff? Is it helpful to then journal, or even, I
Mm.
mean, just
Yes,
create
absolutely.
something even?
Yeah. Journaling, there are a series of prompts. So within the guided practice, which I
Mhm.
guide you. So if I'm guiding you on Zoom or in person, I'm guiding you with prompts, or you have a recording of it.
Mm.
I make recordings for private clients. So I'm guiding you with a series of prompts already within the practice. And then after the practice, there's a moment of integration, of taking time to just rest and notice what there is to be felt. What is it? How is it that you're feeling? And then I guide you through, journaling with the prompts that were sort of dropped in during the practice itself
Sure, yeah.
at the end. So yeah, there's an opportunity to journal and process what you are releasing, what came up for you in the practice. And it's an incredibly empowering and practice to be able to really have that, to have, to take ownership of what it is your body's holding, and being able to release that and move into a more expanded state of wellness, and
Mm.
feeling, safe and at home in your body. And the fact that you're doing this, I find working, I don't know if you find this when you're working online, that when people are in their own home spaces, right? So when you're working on Zoom and people are in their home spaces and their own personal spaces, it adds that extra level of safety, right?
Totally.
So there is greater freedom, right, to release if you need to, right? So if
Totally.
if people are feeling a little bit self-conscious, I ask them to turn the video, turn the computer away, or they can turn off their videos while they're practicing and they're listening to me. But some people love practicing with other people. And that also provides that collective energy of release. So I tend to do both. I'm going to gradually start working my way to doing group sessions again, but I haven't done that for a while. Just
And
for
you would
this
hold,
very thing that people find it safer to do it in their own personal
yeah.
space.
And also, if you, as you say, if you have that period after where you might just want to lie down, um,
Exactly.
rather than having to think, okay, I've got to drive home now, or I've got to get the tube, wherever
Exactly,
you are.
exactly. Yeah, no, it is can be a very cathartic experience. And yeah, you need time for integration, definitely.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's such a big, because I remember when when lockdown first happened, and it was kind of that thought of how are we going to teach yoga online, how are we going to practice yoga online, and obviously, it's nice to have the community, but it works, and there are benefits to it as well.
Exactly, exactly.
Excuse me. Is there, and just I always ask this, it's a bit of a controversial question, but I like to throw a bit of spiciness in there. Is there anything you see online, or in like the wellness landscape, that you think, damn, this is actually not good, this is really harmful, this is counterproductive? Excuse me. You don't have to answer it if you don't want, but if you're feeling it, yeah.
No, I do think, because I work mostly with women who are moving through this phase of perimenopause and menopause and postmenopause. I find some of the harsher kind of hit and cardio practices
Mm.
are can be destabilizing for our hormones at this period, at this time, right? they can increase cortisol levels, and cortisol levels, you don't want to be doing that because stress is the driver of a lot of our symptoms during this phase. So I find really intense cardio, CrossFit workouts not great for if you're moving through this period of life. And you can always return to them. So I find now that I'm on the other side, my body's craving for some of those more intense workouts, like intense yoga practices. So I find that I'm going back. I spent so much time, like I said, lying over my bolster, doing a lot of restorative practice, yin practices, gentle practices. But now I'm finding, I want to go back to a really deep and intense Iyengar practice, or even, I haven't gone back to Ashtanga, but, or I'll do a more intense vinyasa practice. My body's craving, and my body feels strong and capable of doing that now. Where it was, before I didn't feel that, but I still sometimes did it because I felt, that's what I want to do. It's the right thing to do. So in answer to your question, any practice where we're pushing our body into that overdrive, into that stress response, and it really takes, again, that being able to tune into and listen to your body and see what kind of practice it needs on any given day. And our bodies love novelty. Our bodies love variety. So I vary my movement practices from day to day. I have a toolkit of movement practices. So my nonlinear movement practice is my non-negotiable. I do it every day when I wake up, and it can be done to the track of one song. So sometimes it's only 3 minutes, sometimes it's 5 minutes, sometimes it's 10 minutes, sometimes it's a whole playlist. So that's what I love about it, is that it can be done in bite-sized practices, bite-sized movements, where you it's like flossing your teeth. You spend however much time you want or can in that moment, and it does benefit you. So that's my non-negotiable. And weight training for us is so important. Again, from your mid-30s, we start to experience bone loss. So we've been building bone through our youth and into our 20s, but once you hit your 30s, mid-30s, you start to experience a decline in bone density. So making sure your bones are strong is really important. So I do some weight training just for that, just to keep my bones healthy. Certain yoga practices are great for that. So when you hold poses for more than 10 to 30 seconds, you're helping your bones. You're improving that bone density, because it's that tugging of muscle to bone where you're activating those bone strengthening cells. So, if you don't like hitting the gym and doing weight training, which I do think is important, twice a week, 30 minutes, right? You can get some of the same benefits from yoga. Anything where you're weight bearing through your hands, through your feet, through your sit bones is so important to help your bones. So I do weight training and my yoga practices, and I've fallen in love again with Pilates, because I love
Love
I
it.
love sort of that, as I think you used to dance. I used to be a dancer. So I love that lengthening of my muscles. And I love, if you're kind of flexible already, although you don't have to be, it kind of it helps you, maintain that sense of flexibility. It helps my posture, as I said right now, talking to you. And it just, I leave Pilates feeling longer and walking straighter and a little bit more proud, and I love it. So I do and then walking. I love walking. As I said, I live next to a park, and I take my dog walking. Love being outdoors. So I love to vary it. I think it's so important to vary our forms of movement according, to what our body needs on any particular day.
Totally. Yeah, I mean, I got into weights in the last year, and I thought, I'm not going to like this, but I love it. It's because it's it feels quite it makes you feel powerful.
Yeah, strength is so important for us, and feeling strong. I love it. I love that feeling of strength and power.
Yeah. And is there anything that you do that is not really an obvious, let's call it a wellness practice, that you wish more people knew about? It could be, like a hobby or something, anything that puts you, I guess, into that flow state. Is there anything you'd like to share?
Mm, I think really bringing mindful attention to your sensory experience. So engaging with the senses is such a beautiful doorway for deepening our engagement with ourselves and the
Mm.
world around us. And so, um, you know, really taking time to savor a delicious meal, really savoring, noticing the colors, textures, how it feels in your mouth, what it feels like when you put that bite sized morsel into your mouth. Notice everything about it, your sense of when you're walking outdoors in nature, like really bringing mindful attention to what you're seeing, what you're smelling. So engaging with the senses is something I feel we bypass and we don't really bring mindful attention to,
Mm-hmm.
but it is a practice that I try to engage with every day, whether it is, like I said, going to my local park and stopping to smell the roses, literally, or,
Mm.
cooking with herbs in my kitchen and taking time to smell that rosemary or that basil and noticing how it lights me up and what I feel like, what it feels like to
Yes.
nourish myself with that particular scent or that taste. And then touch, right? We know that touch is such a powerful resource that's really literally at our fingertips
Yeah.
for um, for feeling that sense of connection, of safety, of love, right? It activates that oxytocin. I
Yeah,
love
yeah, that's the one.
that. And just having that sense of greater connection with ourselves. So just taking time to engage with our sense of touch.
Mm.
That's another sense. So that I feel is something that's so simple, the senses, right?
Yeah.
That we can really engage with and open up really this beautiful sense of connection.
I love that. And it's so simple, but as you say, we make it almost more complex, don't we?
Or just don't pay attention to it.
Just don't
Yeah,
pay
don't pay
attention.
attention to it at
Yeah.
all.
This has been an absolute pleasure, Gabriella. Thank you so
Oh,
much for
thank
sharing your time and your so much wisdom with us. I know this
you. Very
conversation is going to
welcome.
inspire so many people.
Mm.
Cool.
Thank you so much for having me.